I really don't think I will ever find myself acceptable. Let's have a more reasonable discussion about this. So, number one, right off the bat, you don't have to accept yourself. Many times when people talk about mental health, they find themselves with a kind of a pressure that they're doing something wrong and they need to change their ways. But the thing in life is, there is no real absolute right answer. There is no real absolute wrong answer because why? I'm not just saying this because everything is contextual. There's always a circumstance where something is right, and that same something can be completely wrong in a different circumstance. So, high heat, great for stainless steel pans, right? Because you need the pan to warm up. But if you are working with a pan that's too thin that you got from like a dollar store, high heat is likely going to ruin the coating and makes the pan unusable. But the thing is, it's both in both cases, it's the same high heat, right? So this we can't refute with because this is the absolute truth. Everything is contextual, and therefore you don't find yourself acceptable. You don't need to necessarily change it. Why? Because accepting yourself isn't unilaterally good. Not accepting yourself isn't unilaterally bad. But it just comes with its set of consequences. So, for example, suppose I am really angry and I really want to punch my coworker. Thank God I don't work at a company right now. Hypothetical example. I'm just joking. Anyway, now, could I punch this person? I feel like I can't. That's a little wrong. Why? Because I can. I absolutely have the power to. But now, what likely happens as a consequence? I might get hit back. I may be fired. I may go to jail. So, it would be unfair if I punched and then got off scot-free, right? We need to have consequences in the world. And sometimes I might be lucky and nobody might press charges on me. But the thing is, the moment I make that punch, I have to deal with anything. I have to take responsibility for anything that might come after the punch. I don't like that? Good. Then I have to not do the punch, right? So this is the simple logic around life. We just have to look at the consequences for the situation that we're in. If we like it, there is no real, or if we like it, or if we don't really see that much of a point in applying this much effort in changing it, we have the freedom of not changing it. But if I am like, oh, I really want to change this, but I don't, and I keep complaining about that, then this is more of a me not accepting the responsibilities of consequence rather than this situation is absolutely problematic, right? So, when you don't find yourself acceptable, what is good about that? Acceptable means there has to be a criteria in which you are evaluating yourself with. So, without this criteria, nothing can really be acceptable or not acceptable because what basis are we judging it on? So, my cell phone, is it good or not? Well, how can we define good? Is this a functional phone? Yes, it does work and I can make phone calls on it. So in that case, it's good. But can it solve like supercomputer problems? No. So in that case, is it the most latest phone? Not really. So in that case, this phone doesn't really cut it. This is a chocolate wrapper that I snacked on today. Is this big or small compared to this joystick cover? It's a dog's paw. Well, compared to this is bigger. But compared to the palm of my hand, this is smaller. But what is the size of this? I can't tell you because what am I comparing it against, right? So with physical things, this is a little bit easier to understand. But I suppose I got a 90% on my test. My wife got a 92% on her test. We took the same test. So who did better? In that case, my wife did better than me, right? But suppose I took a test and I don't know anybody else who took the test. Did I do good or bad? Did I do well or not? I have no idea because I can't really base myself on. But we inherently have this standard, right? If it's not an A, then I didn't do a good job. Why? Because unconsciously, we have a predefined standard that when I take a test, I need to get an A. We mistake a rule that we unconsciously created in my mind with an actual rule that applies to everyone truthfully and realistically. So when we don't find ourselves acceptable, it is likely that you have an unconscious standard in which you compare yourself with. Now, maybe you have a very explicit standard, and this can be good when you are trying to actually work towards a certain goal, right? So for example, I want to take a French test called DELF, and I want to take the C1 level. And in order to do that, I need to know, do I know my vocabulary? Can I write my French? Can I speak French? Can I, recall sentences at will? Those things are standards that I have for myself, and I need to work towards them. So for that goal, finding myself acceptable or not is very important because it gives me measurable steps towards my goal. But in general, as a human being, if I can't accept myself, what's the consequence of that? If I punch a person, I can go to jail, I can get, press charges, the other person can hit me back. Those are the consequences, right? If I eat this paper, I might have stomach problems later down. That's the consequence of it, right? If I throw this on the ground, my dog can eat it. Those are the consequences that come from this, right? So what's the consequence of not accepting myself the way I am? Suffering. There's no way around not accepting yourself for who you are and not suffering. You can't be free from suffering without self-acceptance. So if you want to suffer, then continuing to hold yourself against an invisible standard and not accepting yourself is fine. Sometimes changing ourselves and then, changing the way we live, the way we think, it's hard work. I understand this. So that's why I'm not saying this to joke around. I'm not saying this in less of a gravity, right? Sometimes we just don't have the energy to work on ourselves. So in those cases, it's fine to recover, get some energy back while thinking, wow, I suck, I'm so lazy. But as long as we get the stamina and then we want to work towards a little bit of a difference in our lives, we want to think a little bit more about what is my standard anyway? Why do I compare myself like this? Why? What is the criteria that I use and where did it come from? If you want to ask these questions, you can. But not finding yourself acceptable, is it absolutely wrong? Not at all. Do you have to accept yourself? Not at all. But do you have to live with the consequences of your choice regardless of what kind of a life you live? That is the yes.